Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Melissa Siegel. I'm a professor of migration studies, and this is a channel about all things migration. And today we are going to be talking about pushbacks and what pushbacks are, particularly as they are related to migration. Now, there is no internationally agreed upon legal definition of what a pushback is in migration management. Nevertheless, several attempts have been made to define it, and so we do have some kind of conceptualization of what this term means that is a bit more clear. So the most commonly used definition comes from the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights of Migrants report, means to address the human rights impact of pushbacks of migrants on land and sea. And here pushbacks are defined as various measures taken by states which result in migrants, including applicants for international protection, being summarily forced back to the country from where they attempted to cross or have crossed an international border without access to international protection or asylum procedures, or denied any individual assessment on their protection needs, which may lead to a violation of the principle of non-refoulement. So despite the lack of a universal standard, it can be clearly understood as behavior violating the general rule of non-refoulement. To further understand the concept of non-refoulement, of course, you can check out another video on this channel that explains the principle of non-refoulement, and I'll make sure to link it down in the description below. It can also be seen as violating the right to asylum. Now, what differentiates pushbacks from deportations and readmissions? Deportations, or they're also known as removals, refer to the enforcement of an expulsion order against a non-national, requiring them to leave a state's territory involuntarily. So this means that they are conducted within the legality of the system, which is not the case for pushbacks. Readmission are legal procedures governed by bilateral or often multilateral agreements between states, allowing a country to accept the re-entry of an individual into its territory. However, what is illegal is for a destination country to return individuals to their country of origin or transit without allowing them to put in an asylum claim if they have expressed a desire to seek asylum or stated that they fear returning. So to clarify some of these differences, here are some hypothetical examples of each situation. An example of a deportation could be a case of a non-EU national residing in France without a valid visa who is issued a deportation order after they've had a due process of their case. So authorities have reviewed the case, they've provided an opportunity for appeal, and none of these have been found to be valid. And so then France arranges for the individual to be returned to their country of origin through formal channels. Now, in the case of readmissions, we could think of an individual who has entered Italy irregularly via the Mediterranean Sea from Tunisia, who is returned under a readmission agreement between the two countries, provided they have not applied for asylum and meet the criteria established in the agreement. Finally, and this is the case that we're talking about today, an example of a pushback could be seen if a group of asylum seekers attempts to cross from Turkey into Greece, but is intercepted by border guards who force them back across the border with Turkey without registering their claims or assessing their protection needs. So that would be considered a pushback. Now, why do we see pushbacks in practice, even though we know that they generally violate human rights law? So in the past 5 years, pushbacks have become an important, if not unofficial, part of the migration regime of EU countries and elsewhere in the world. Nevertheless, the practice is not new. In the late 1990s, Italy carried out pushbacks targeting Albanians and Kosovars by intercepting migrant boats in the Adriatic Sea and returning them to Albania. Later, similar practices were applied to migrants coming from Libya, as migration control cooperation was strengthened in the early 2000s through bilateral agreements, including the 2008 Treaty on Friendship, Partnership, and Cooperation, which allowed Italy to intercept boats at sea and return migrants directly to Libya. However, it was not until 2012 that the European Court of Human Rights recognized that the practice of rescuing migrants and then returning them to their country of origin without allowing them to apply for asylum was a violation of international law, and therefore it was prohibited. So this ruling in Hirshiyama versus Italy set a new legal precedent by confirming that such practices constitute illegal pushbacks, reinforcing the obligation of states to respect the principle of non-refoulement. Now, especially after the so-called 2015 migration crisis, pushbacks increased as part of the EU migration strategy, with EU member states prioritizing border security over migrant protection. In fact, the UN Special Rapporteur on Migrants in 2022 reported that pushbacks remain the de facto general policy in many states, with efforts to cover up these violations because we do know they are against both EU and international law. One of the trends that accelerated in 2015 is the externalization of border control, which is closely tied to the practices of pushbacks. And if you're interested to know more about the general externalization of migration governance, you can check out my video also on the channel on that, and I'll link it in the description below. So rather than carrying out pushbacks themselves, the EU has increasingly relied on third countries like Turkey and Libya to intercept and return migrants before they even reach EU jurisdiction. Thereby, they can avoid legal responsibility for direct expulsion. So this is a way for the EU to get around their own law and international law. So an example of this is the fact that even though the 2008 Treaty of Friendship between Italy and Libya was suspended in 2011, Italy resumed similar practices in 2017 by supporting the Libyan Coast Guard to carry out interceptions and returns, leading to further human rights concerns. Now, pushbacks are not exclusive to Europe, but have really become a global practice in many parts of the world. So some notable examples include U.S. policies along the southern border and Australia's offshore detention centers. So in Australia, individuals arriving by sea are barred from seeking international protection. Instead, if they apply for asylum, they are transferred to detention centers outside Australian jurisdiction, such as those in Nauru. So these facilities are funded by the Australian government and have faced criticisms for limited access by human rights organizations. In fact, in January of 2025, the United Nations Human Rights Committee found that Australia violated a human rights treaty by detaining asylum seekers, including minors, in Nauru. Migrants rescued at sea may also be sent to these centers or returned to their territorial waters of countries like Indonesia or Sri Lanka, which absolutely constitutes pushbacks. Now, why are pushbacks problematic? So they're really problematic both on humanitarian grounds and legal grounds. At this point, I think no one can be surprised that pushbacks are problematic because they violate international law, in particular the principle of non-refoulement, and because they prohibit the individual from the right to apply for asylum, which is also an infringement of the Geneva Convention, making it a violation of international law. In terms of EU legislation, Article 18 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union guarantees the right to asylum, while Article 19 prohibits collective expulsions, therefore condemning illegal pushbacks. Furthermore, Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights forbids transferring, deporting, or extraditing individuals to a country where they face serious risk of execution, torture, or inhumane or degrading treatment. Now, despite this, pushbacks are widely practiced and systematically implemented at both Europe's internal and external borders. In practice, this is translated into countries employing excessive force, degrading treatment, arbitrary detentions, and violent and inhumane tactics to force vulnerable individuals back across the border they attempted to cross, clearly making the practice both illegal and wrong on humanitarian grounds. As if this situation weren't concerning enough, migrants may also be returned to unsafe countries where they risk abuse, torture, and forced labor. Now, in 2022, the Protecting Rights at Borders Initiative documented 1,911 pushback cases in the EU's external borders within the first 3 months of 2022. In 2023, over 28,000 migrants experienced pushbacks and other human rights violations at European borders. An even greater issue is that these figures represent only a fraction of the actual number of illegal pushbacks occurring across Europe, as the report relies only on first-hand data collected through fieldwork and migrant interviews. So for years, human rights organizations have documented violence and mistreatment of migrants and asylum seekers by border officials. For example, the Danish Refugee Council in 2024 indicated that 83% of those arriving at the Croatian-Bosnia and Herzegovina border experienced degrading treatment, and this was also found along the France and Italy border in 61% of cases. As migrants undertake dangerous journeys in pursuit of safety and opportunity, they often face the harsh reality of pushbacks and forced returns. Reports from NGOs and media document beatings, theft, destruction of migrants' belongings, illegal detentions, and abandonment at sea by border authorities. Frontex has even been implicated in such practices, including cases where migrants were abandoned at sea on life rafts, which is clearly against international and EU law. States have also played a significant role in these tragedies, as pushbacks can result in death when boats are left stranded without aid. A notable example of this is Safi and others v. Greece in 2022, which is a case where Greece was condemned for the deaths of 11 asylum seekers after the Coast Guard allegedly caused their boat to capsize and then also failed to conduct a proper rescue operation. Now, I hope you can see why pushbacks are really problematic, and we should be concerned that we are seeing more and more use of pushbacks, not only within the EU, but in other countries across the globe. If you have any additional information on pushbacks, if you are also aware of other cases where countries have been held liable or responsible, I urge you to also tell us about these in the comment section. If you found this video useful, please, of course, give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't done so already, make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the videos that we upload on a regular basis on this channel. And I do hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.